Hi, my name's Cynthia Labenski. I teach at Jefferson Middle School. I'm an 8th grade ELA teacher. I also have been given honors this year as well. I want to start out by saying I feel like I'm really fortunate to be at Jefferson Middle School. We say that we're a family, and we mean that in the truest sense. I get a great deal of support here, and we're student-centered, and the instructors have a great deal of autonomy and independence as well. So with that being said, it was a little difficult to come up with a conflict. I haven't had that many, but on reflecting on it, one of the things that I have had that's a negative experience is being an alternative route teaching certification. So although not necessarily from my school, from other schools that I collaborate with, and from working at a summer program all within my district, I've had negative views of not having a bachelor's degree in education. My degree is in cultural anthropology. So initially, the way I felt about this was obviously it hurt my feelings, and it made me doubt my qualifications, and consequently it affected my confidence. Also, it made me think that I have a lot to offer, that I am multidisciplinary, and I have a lot of life experience. I was a professional and I was a non-professional. I've had other careers, and this is my chosen career now. This is the field that I'm in. I also had to think about what was true, and what is true is I am a new teacher, and I don't have the depth of knowledge as some of the others. I don't think that makes me less qualified or less capable of doing the job that I'm doing. So I had to think about that and set out to think about how was I going to do the best job that I can. And that's what I want to do, is the best job that I can. One of the identifiers that I found out was what makes some of the other teachers think this way is TFA, for instance. Oftentimes we don't stick around, right? I live here in Idaho. I'm going to stay in Idaho. I have a family. I'm married. I have a little girl. I have a home. So I'm not going anywhere. And this is where I am, and this is what I'm choosing to do, and I'm committed. So thinking about that, I had to think about how am I going to be an example of someone in an alternate route program like TFA, or like a couple of other teachers that we have here. They're ABCTE, and they're wonderful teachers, but they feel the negativity sometimes as well. And instead of combating that, I think what I myself have chosen to do is to lead by example, to set out to be the best I can. One of the ways of doing that is to tackle all of my resources, talk to as many people as I can. I spoke to my professor and said, what's your recommendation? Do you think seeking other opportunities? Should I try to get on a committee? Things like this. And he said, Cynthia, be the best teacher that you can be. So the second question you asked that I read and reflect on TFA's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusivity. This was a really great question. I enjoyed this. I liked going back and rereading and reflecting on that, and it was quite funny because some things are different. One of the things I reflected on was when I was first accepted into TFA, and we went to induction and institute. We had quite a bit of programming on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. And I thought, this is my belief system. It's ingrained. I got this, and I understand it quite well. And the biases and worldview, I thought I'm open. and I'm very accepting, and this speaks to me. I get it. When I started teaching, before I began, and I learned the school I would be in and about it, we have 61% Hispanic. That's actually quite higher. I can speak to that in a little bit, why that number is not exactly accurate. And 86% of our student population gets a reduced or free breakfast and lunch. So largely our school is low income and minority driven. I had preconceived ideas, some kind of unrealized notions of what my kids were going to be like. I thought they were going to be kind of a mixed Central American group of kids, that they would speak Spanish, fluent Spanish, very little or not English quite well, if at all, and that they would probably have been, many of them would have been born in another country and then moved here. So that was my idea. That's not the case. My students are first and second generation Americans. They're born here. They do speak Spanish and they speak English. They don't grammatically and formal English or Spanish isn't communicated, written, or spoken very well. So this confused me. I couldn't figure out why that was. It didn't fit within these preconceived notions that I had. So that was one. And then also, there's lots of different things. These are two examples. We were working on a section in our unit where we covered civil rights quite a bit, and we talked about race and injustices and racism and discrimination, oppression, things like that. And they really had a difficult time understanding those concepts. And I asked them once to write on a prompt where they would answer if they had ever felt discriminated against, or if they had witnessed someone else having this happen to them. And by and large, they hadn't experienced this, and they didn't feel it. Again, I thought that this was going to be something that they very much understood. I needed to dive deeper into this and figure out, well, what are my students' barriers? Because they're low on the reading scale, their scores are low, they have trauma, they have all of these different things going on, and I had all of these ideas in my head that weren't true. So it's right back to what we were talking about in induction and in institute, in our DEI sessions, that I had a worldview and I had biases that were unrealized, and they were seeping out into my classroom, and I had to change that, and I had to figure out what were these issues with my students. And one, there are a lot, let's be honest. One example I can give you is my student population is a very high migrant population, which means that they're migrant farm workers that move around the area in different parts of Idaho. Many of my students are, but they can also go to California or Oregon or wherever, and then sometimes they come back. Sometimes you never see them again. This is a big problem. They miss school. Some of them work. They miss school quite a bit, and that's one reason why our numbers are kind of off. So I guess one of the problems with my worldview and my bias is that I just needed to get to know my kids. I needed to build a relationship with them, number one. And then I needed to get into the community and figure out what that is. Well, luckily, like I said, I'm at a great school, and that's something that we have already started doing. So kind of at a policy level, when these shifts occur with the kids changing schools, we want to keep them at our school. So how can we do that? We fought for the right to allow them to be in a different district and to provide them the transportation that they need to get to the school, because that's another one of the barriers. Again, this is institutions, policies, and practices that are not responsive and not supportive to our students, that we've had to go in and interrupt the oppressive system that's a barrier to keeping them from fulfilling their success. Through that, I've learned that my full potential can't be realized without building these relationships on micro and macro levels. So building the relationships with the students, and then that relationship has to be inclusive of the community. And then within the community, again, interrupting the oppressive systems that are already in place, to ensure that every student is really seen, that they feel valued, and that they're heard. So I think I understand it very differently than when I first read the TFA's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusiveness and the guiding questions. I look at those in a completely different way. I look at it with a very deep sense of responsibility on my part, even though I'm a teacher in a classroom, that I do have the ability to create a role and be a leader, to change a policy, to get an institution or practice or policy to change. And there are steps to do those. And luckily, I'm beginning to understand also that a coalition, surrounding yourself with people, being a leader who can create an alliance that can help make these shifted systemic changes, it's possible. I think it takes some time, but by acting as an example of that and leading, just even in my classroom, that I'm leading as an example for diversity, equity, and inclusiveness for staff, for alumni, and for other core members. So thank you very much. I think my time is up.